because he's like, well, mRNA, it's an mRNA virus or mRNA vaccine. Isn't that going to screw up my DNA? And I just explained to him, like, what is mRNA and how does it fit into the story? And then he was like, oh, that's not that scary. So it's a really basic stuff. Even in this first module of zoology, when we talk about evolution, we're talking about Bio 120. We're talking about DNA, we're talking about proteins, right? We're talking about gene expression. It's all there, right? You can't just say like, oh, that was like the worst experience of my life. I'm just gonna flush that one down, right? Would you agree, Sarah? I mean, at some point, it's like, you have to come back to this stuff. It's the foundation of all biology.
Definitely go down in history. All this COVID stuff, but man,
Yeah.
crazy people.
No, and a lot of this stuff, it's getting to the point now, technology is advancing so fast. Even just to go to the doctor's office, you almost need to know some of this stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
I'd like to ask you, and it's not related to this, but why are people, because I brought up history, why are people trying to remove history?
Yeah, true.
That's a big one.
I was just curious. I know it's way off topic. But like, they're trying to change and say the Holocaust never happened. And stuff.
Yeah, unlike the civil, like everything
Like what?
before the Civil War never happened, like they're taking down everything like.
Wow.
that.
Everything
Yeah.
that was bad, yeah.
It's-
Taking it out and like putting a little cap on it. Never happened.
That's very complex stuff, and
I mean, if you
You have
put it
to-
up, it's gonna happen.
Part
I
of me
remember
like-
my history teacher from high school, he always says history repeats itself.
Exactly, yeah. If you remove it, it's gonna happen again.
well, here's what I'll say
How
about critical
nature works.
thinking. You have to really try to be able to empathize with what people,
Yeah.
their experiences in life are. And so we're seeing things from our own standpoint. And so you got to try to understand what the same thing can mean to somebody else too, So, okay, I'm going to try to find this thing.
That's sorry, it was off topic. I was just
No,
talking
it's
about
fine.
history and like,
Is the videos for the lectures gonna be under modules?
Yes, so when you see, you will not computer. You'll see module 1, and then there's gonna be lecture 1. There'll be the PDF of this,
Yeah.
and then underneath that, I will indent 1, will be the video. Yeah, so I think it'll be pretty logical. And now, we go till what, 12:15? Okay, yeah, so we've got a little time. Okay. The first modules, the chapters are a little out of whack. Like we're gonna start with chapter 4, but honestly, I'm doing that because that's how the Lizard Lab goes through these same topics. And it makes sense the way that they do it, and I don't think it's gonna be all that confusing to do chapter 4 and then 3, 2, 1. But basically, big picture of the first module is that, well, how many species of animals do you think there are on species of animals?
millions,
Millions.
Million?
millions.
No.
I mean,
Billion.
Isn't there like?
Bazillions.
Isn't there like more insects than?
Yeah, there's probably a million species of insect, arthropods.
Yeah, I read somewhere it was like more bugs in the world than actual other animals.
Yeah, so there's probably, and we talk, there's a lot of research on, because there's big differences between the actual number of species and then the number of described species. Okay, we're gonna talk today about what does it take to describe a species. Okay, what does species mean anyways? What is a species? How do we define them? And then how does one come into being in a human sense, as a human construct, right? But there are an actual number of species out there, right, that we have not conceived, we've not discovered them, we've not described them, we don't understand that they're actually different from other species that we know of, right? But the first module is about how scientists make sense of the diversity of animals, okay? how do we categorize animals? How do we group them together? How do we study and reconstruct their evolutionary history, right? We can't go back in time to see who's related to who and who begat who begat who begat who, but there are ways of sort of inferring that, looking at things like DNA and genomes. We can reconstruct that. And then we're going to talk about how the process of where the diversity came from. Okay, why do we have so many different kinds of little fishes in our creek around here? Right? Why do we have so many types of sparrows? Right? What is the process that has created that diversity? That's module 1 in a nutshell. Okay, and the Lizard Lab, I feel like it does a pretty good job of going along with that, and it gives you a different perspective on the same topics. Okay, and so we're going to touch back on that. That is, by the way, that assignment that is due next week. And so we're going to start here, chapter 4. All right. Not surprisingly, is about species, okay? And why do we start out with that? Because this is really the unit, the functional unit of zoology, okay? So when we study evolution, we study how species are related to each other, how they evolve over time. When governments decide which organisms should be protected, we talk about species, right? There's going to be a list for the Georgia Division of Natural Resources. There's going to be a list of protected species, right? For example, Atlantic gray whale is protected, but some other whales, well, actually almost all whales are protected. But the eastern indigo snake is protected, but the eastern rat snake is not protected, right? So this is the unit in which we make our rules and laws about Endangered Species Act, things like that. It's right in the name, Endangered Species Act, right? When you go to zoos and aquarium, what's the little label on the cage? It's what species you're seeing in there, okay? This is just like, but I was kind of surprised when I started to study biology in earnest, how difficult it is to actually define what a species is, right? There's probably more like I think that one estimate we read in seminar last year was like up to 8 million different species of animals on Earth. Okay. And so okay, how do we name species? Right, this is you guys all know about this binomial two-name system developed this is a new thing for me. I get kind of bored teaching the same thing. They always used to call this guy named Carolus linensis, but I think it was a little too stuffy and unapproachable, so now they call him Carl. His name is Carl Linnaeus, and he came up with this idea. He said, for every of all those millions of species, we just need 2 different names, a genus name and a species name. And we're going to use Latin, okay? Because, why Latin? Because it's universal. And what else do we know about Latin?
Dead.
It's dead, right? So when I say alba today, it means light. And when I say alba in 1,000 years, it's going to mean the same thing, right? Versus English is constantly evolving and changing, right? Fat, I don't know, is that good now or bad? Saying if I tell you guys are fat, is that good or bad? Dope, dope is a good thing? I don't know. I don't, but y'all, I don't, you guys are young and all that, yeah.
But so we know, how detailed is your test? Like, do we need to know Carol DNA is?
I don't, no, you'll start to see some patterns as you go. I try not to pick up on trivial trivia, like dates and things like that, exact numbers, because that's exactly the kind of thing that, I went to school for 13 years. If I could tell you, like, I could probably write down on a piece of paper all the stuff that I actually learned, like, that I know now,
Mhm.
right? A lot of stuff like that, you learn, you don't, you learn, you don't, you learn, it's a waste of time. Try to look for patterns, some things that will be, you probably consider trivia, and I don't, but, I'm trying not to get into like little tiny details. Before old Carl came along, there was like, a species might be described by like 14 different words. It's bulky, it's confusing, right? It is, what's the word I'm looking for? Or you could be confused whether it's this or it's that. It's,
Variation.
yeah, I love this game of like trying to just guess the word, right? It'll come to me. There, Carl. Well, he looks like a nice guy.
Looks like a bird.
Christmas is already gone, but my birthday's in July, and if anybody wants to give me a wave. So, how do species become named? Again, think of it, there's like two different things. There are species out there that we've never known, we've never found, humans have never, at least like the people that matter, those scientists, nerdy people, probably somebody knows about them, but not the scientific community. But then once it becomes named and described, it becomes a thing, okay? I don't know, this is kind of like a philosophical thing, but this is something, I sort of created one species myself, and I knew that it was a thing when I could do this Google search about it. Sarah, when you were at Marshall, did you take a class with Dr. Pauly?
I did.
I named the species after him. And it has a Wikipedia page. It's a real species, right? There's the species. Isn't it so freaking cool? This thing is so awesome, guys. And Dr. Pauly's awesome, so it just kind of just fits. But my point is, it becomes a human construct when this happens. When you name a new species, here's what you have to establish. And people all the time, they come to me, they're like, I found, roly-poly bugs, they're like, I found this roly-poly, is it a new species? I'm like, think about what that entails. Number one, you need to know all of the other species of roly-polies to know that this one's different, right? You need to establish, using evidence, that this species is different than all the other million species of animals. It becomes named when you publish it, okay? You can't just say that this is a different species of roly-poly bug, and I declare it here on the 18th of January in 2021. You have to, and what is this usually entails getting through a group of peers. You have to have it reviewed by experts. They have to agree, and then it has to be published. And then there's a lot of people who are very well trained in this. This is what Dr. Davenport does. She's a plant taxonomist. She knows her stuff when it comes to plants. She's an expert. And so you have to get, basically, this step is consensus in the scientific community that it is a new species. Because think about this, otherwise you'd have like Crazy Carl out in his garage naming new species of birds and things. You're like, you have to have some stability, and it has to be in the community of scientists. The publication has these are the main components of a species description. Number one, you have to describe, this is called I can't remember which part of the species description is, but you have to tell people, here is exactly how this species is different from other known species. Maybe it's morphology, maybe it's the presence of a certain bone, maybe it is a DNA sequence that differentiates them from other species, okay? You have to name the species, and there are rules provided, right, by this International Convention on Zoological Nomenclature. Okay, again, there's a good example of something I'm not going to ask you, like, what does this mean? But I might ask you, what are the three main things that are part of a species description? Number one, How's it different? Number two, what are you calling it? And number three, you have to tell the world that somewhere there is an animal in a jar that is what we call a type specimen. Okay? That is the archetypal Plethodon polyi. And this can be, actually, they have done this now where a picture, photograph can be a type specimen. But what do you suppose, in a philosophical sense, what is the function of this type specimen? What does that serve as?
A control?
Yeah, it's sort of a control. And in what way is it a control?
It's at the basis of all that species. It's like how it started from that species and then breaks off into all.
And see how it evolves
Yeah.
over time.
Okay.
looking back at
It's like a
the
base-
ancestor.
Like a baseline, right? Because again, what's the first thing we had to establish in order, say if I find another salamander and I'm like, well, I think this is different too. What's the first question I'm gonna say? Is the species different than this existing one? And how do you answer that question? You compare it to the type specimen. This becomes the comparison. Going forward, anytime you want to know, is this something new, different from the existing, this is the existing. Right, yeah.
How different does it have to be a new?
Yes, and so, as I said, at first kind of like, well, there's white-tailed deer and there's mule deer. They're totally different, right? But that is an obvious case. You're going to see people spend their whole lives arguing about that exact question right there. And there is no exact answer, right? Because, you could take humans, for example, right? If you look at just shapes and sizes, there's all different kinds of humans, right? We have very different shapes and colors and hair textures and heights and all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, we're very almost identical genetically, right? And there are things that it makes it totally obvious that humans, of course, are the same species, right? But this is where we get into the subjectivity, is to say, well, I think it's different enough. I don't think it's different enough. And that comes down to this publication, right? If you say it's different and you define exactly how different, and you can get a group of experts in that field to go along with you, that's where you make the case. Your evidence suggests that it's different enough to be declared a new species. Right? But that is what really makes it interesting. Right? And this happens a lot, actually. The 20,000, there's a whole journal that publishes every week, and all that's in that journal is species descriptions. Thousands of species are described every year. The species names can be, they can be named after places. Lots of, anybody know what this animal is? Otocolis virginianus? How nerdy are you?
I'm just gonna take a guess at it. Is it some type of octopus? Because they said octopus and.
Oh, Otocolis? I don't know the etymology of where this comes from. This is the white-tailed deer.
Oh,
Maybe from Virginia?
In where did a lot of the original naturalists, they came to Canada, Castor canadensis, they came to the Carolinas, Terrapin Carolina, they came to Virginia, right? So a lot of things are named after those original places. That if I could go back, I would be like that person who's like arrived and like everything you saw is new, and you just start writing all these species descriptions. That would be so cool, right? You can name a species after people. So this is a type of mosquito, and when this mosquito it parasitizes another organism, it causes that organism to thrash around and twist its belly around like a belly dancer, like Shakira. So they named this species after her. Yeah. I heard
She
it.
likes that.
Huh?
I don't know if she likes that.
Well, yes, it can go both ways. You name a nice, cute little salamander after somebody, then I promise you're getting a Christmas card.
Yeah, That
No,
would be- that's-
there's one, that was named, this guy named, I don't know if you guys know what a stink corn mushroom is. Let's see.
And what?
They're really, they smell awful. I've tried lighting here, but, this is what they look like. Looks like something, part of it. Well, one guy found one and he said it looked like a 3-inch long flaccid penis, and he named it after his friend. And his friend was see, science is not, we can talk, this is science, y'all. Totally cool. You do not need to feel uncomfortable right now, because we're talking about science, right? So, but the guy was like, you know, scientists tend to have a really good sense of humor. And so the guy was like, that's awesome, you know? But you can name parasites after people, or, you know, so there's all different ways to honor somebody, right? It can be descriptive. We're just keep right into the next thing. That's how we roll in this class. This is cool. This is the Northern Pine, right? So Pichu means blowing. Ophis means snake. Melano means, what do you think, melanin?
White.
Black.
Okay, so melanin. Eumelanin is what gives people that have their heritage from the tropics their skin tone. And then leucus, like a leukocyte, is a white. So it's a white and black blowing snake. And that pretty much exactly describes the Northern Pine snake. And if you get into scientific names, you're going to see repeated, basically like root words, right? You're going to see Albus and Brevity, Cotta. Know these. These will be on the first test, right? If you go to like a big school and you're in the zoology department at University of Michigan, you probably have the opportunity to take Latin for scientists, and you just learn all of these root words, right? So let's. Okay, we will continue our discussion of chapter 4 on Thursday. And I think this is just kind of like a good stopping point. So get the lab book. Start working on the lizard lab.
How long do you say it would take the lab?
Well, for that lab, honestly, it'll probably take you a good solid 2 hours at least to do that lab. But you've got between, now, check on the video, there's a way that you can work on it a little bit and save it. And then you can, using a Google account, you can go back and pick up where you left off. And I hope to kind of like tie that in with what we're talking about in class as we go, so you know, like, why are we making you do this?
It takes 3 hours between a PowerPoint,
Okay,
the whole
okay. It would,
module.
yeah, and then that's one of the rare cases where we're in lab for all 3 hours, right? So,
It's weird.
but all right, y'all, it's been fun. We'll see you next week on Tuesday or Monday in lab. Oh, no, there is no lab next week.
Or
I've turned this off, so if you want to use that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Oh,
I wasn't sure. I figured if I had it this long, probably not, but.
I'll bring it to them.
Andre, you said Barry said it's just gonna be on for the rest of the
Yeah, yeah, so what I'm gonna stop to do right now, stop that recording and I'll upload it.